Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to an afternoon edition of Coffee and Capital. I think this is the second time we've ever done this, so it's a nice change of pace. But we're happy to have you with us, and I see some new names, so welcome to all of you first-timers, and welcome back to any return attendees. Today, we are joined by Christie Canaria. She is the NCI, or National Cancer Institute's SBIR Program Director. Christie joins us to take your questions and go over the funding and resource basics for small businesses that are seeking funding for their innovative cancer technologies. But we'll be hearing from Christie in just a couple of minutes here to have her introduce herself and talk a little bit about her work. But before we do, as always, we'd love to hear from all of you on the call today. So if we could, we'll go around the room, as it were, just give a very brief introduction to ourselves. So your name, your company, or even if your idea for a company, if you're just in the concept stage, and what brings you on the call today. So this is just a nice way to get to know each other, build some familiarity, and give some context to Christie for any of your questions. And you never know who you might meet on these calls. It could be a way to connect with someone afterwards. So as I said, I'll just go around the Zoom and call you out by name. But first, I'll introduce myself. I'm Jake Ritzheimer. I'm the program coordinator for Quorum at the University City Science Center. I do not have cancer technology that I'm working on or anything entrepreneurial, but I'm always impressed and fascinated by the people on these calls and getting the chance to learn more about you all and what you're up to. So with that, I will pass it off to Lisa.
Lisa looks muted, or perhaps unavailable at the moment.
Oh, she can't unmute. Let's see. Okay, no worries. We can jump around. No, sorry, Lisa, we can't hear you right now. But wait, if you can eventually unmute yourself, we'd love to hear from you. But for now, why don't we jump over to Lilia?
Hello, I'm covering this event for a client of the Cohen Group's an advisory firm in Washington, D.C. And I'm just here to listen in and see what information might be helpful for our client. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Lilia. Glad to have you with us. Next up on my screen, I see Cynthia.
Hello, everybody. I'm Cindy Majay. I work for Citizens Bank. I am a healthcare relationship manager in the Mid-Atlantic, just trying to support life sciences and pharmaceutical companies in the area from a banking perspective. And certainly supporting the Science Center as well, as we have a relationship and are looking for ways to partner with the Science Center and help in that regard also. So looking forward to hearing the conversation today and happy to be here and meet you all virtually.
Great, thank you, thank you. Sorry if I look like I'm a shadowy figure on a true crime documentary. I'm trying to play with the lighting in here. All right, next up I see Anita.
Yes, hi, I'm Anita Bella. I am the co-founder of a small biotech called HB Therapeutics. We are located in Indianapolis, and the focus of our company is the development of small molecule degrade targeting some cancer-related protein. And I'm here to learn about new opportunity and also whether the Biden administration and the new program will create new opportunity in the SBIR, STTR programs.
Excellent. Thank you very much. All right. How about William?
Hi, actually, I'm another program director at NCI SBIR Development Center. I'm a bit new, so I just pop into these every now and then and see how other excellent program officers handle these presentations. But happy to be here and meet all of you.
All right, cool. Oh.
Hey, Billy.
Sorry, just a moment, folks. My computer screen just went blank. Okay, cool, I'm back. That was odd. All right, Judith, if you would.
Hi, I'm Judith Sheft. I'm the Executive Director of the New Jersey Commission on Science, Innovation, and Technology. We have done some programs in collaboration with the Science Center, particularly the QED program, where a number of New Jersey universities have been able to participate in that program. And the Commission also provides SBIR matching grants for New Jersey companies who've received phase 1 or are in between phase 1 and phase 2 awards.
I love to hear that New Jersey is doing that. Thank you.
Perfect. All right. I think, oh wait, we have someone. Oh, Allie, if you would. Sorry, I didn't see your name there.
Hi, my name's Allie. I'm currently, I just started a position as the marketing and experience intern here at Venture Cafe. And I'm excited to listen into this session. Yeah.
Welcome, Allie.
All right, Phil Brooks on the call, another Science Center member.
Hey everyone, my name is Phil Brooks. I am the Director of STEM Workforce Partnerships at the University City Science Center. My day job is just overseeing workforce development efforts with the Science Center, specifically connecting companies to communities and ways to promote practices, racial equity as it relates to kind of like disrupting hiring practices and getting more folks in the door with different types of industries. So really just here to listen, absorb, and learn.
Perfect. Thank you, Phil. And last but not least, I see, is it Pam?
Hi, Pam. All right, just on chat. Sounds good.
Oh, okay. No worries. Cool. All right. Well, with that, thank you all for introducing yourselves. Great to hear from you. Now I'd like to reintroduce Christie Canaria, who's here to talk to us about NCI's SBIR program. So Christie, if you would, maybe just tell us a bit about yourself and the work that you do, and then we can jump into questions.
Absolutely. And thank you so much, Jake, for hosting and leading us through those introductions. I've been taking notes, and it's really great to hear from each of you your interests. And I'm hoping that with our conversation today, I can touch on those topics. As you heard from my colleague Billy, he is also another program director, and so our office is actually comprised of on order a dozen program directors. We have different portfolios that we cover. For myself, I'm actually trained as a chemist. I began my bachelor's and Ph.D. are both in chemistry, but I came into the NCI's SBIR Development Center through the route of doing science policy. And so what that means is I have a deep interest in helping with resources. And through policy, that means funding and programs to support entrepreneurship. And that's really what our office is about. My backgrounds in portfolio include imaging tools, digital health, a lot of AI is coming to my portfolio as well. Other colleagues, such as Billy and others, carry a heavy load of therapeutics and small molecules types of projects. But between all of those, our office is really focused on small businesses and technologies in the cancer space. And so if anyone here is also looking at other areas in the life sciences, just please also note that our sister agencies at the National Institutes of Health cover a wide range of technologies through our missions for either specific disease indications or health areas. And so all of that is covered at the NIH, and it's my pleasure to be here and help guide you through all of that. So one hat is as a program director at NCI SBIR. Another hat that I wear is as the program director for the I-Corps program at the NIH. And if any of you here is familiar with I-Corps through the NSF, through their national program, or perhaps through their National Innovation Network, through their sites or their nodes, you'll be familiar with that curriculum. The way the NIH program is set up is it's slightly different in that our audience and our participants are considered eligible by virtue of having an active phase 1 SBIR or STTR award. And so with our sister agency, the NSF, they've demonstrated time and again that the lean startup curriculum is something that can absolutely benefit academics, researchers in the university setting or the bench setting. However, we've found in SBIR world that the same curriculum still has a profound impact on innovators continuing to develop their technology. And I think everyone here will appreciate that it's really a sort of spectrum for how technologies progress from sort of the bench to the bedside, lab to market. And so we are focused through programming like I-Corps to support that. At NCI SBIR, the big portion of what we do is support through funding. And so those are the SBIR, STTR funds. I can go over that a little bit. But our office also has other programming that we provide, like the I-Corps program, but addressing the different needs that we recognize entrepreneurs have. And so we're really focused on sort of being a place where all cancer minded researchers, entrepreneurs, small businesses can turn to find the tools they need to continue developing their technologies further. So that's just a little of me. And as I promised Jake, I don't have any slides, but I have my copy and I have my notes based on what I heard people talking about. And so I'm really looking forward to just, chatting with you. And with this kind of audience size, I don't know what the best way is to move forward, but maybe I could just touch on I'll start with some of the things that I heard. For instance, those who provide third-party funds, either in matching funds or public and private funds. So for everyone here, I think many of you are probably familiar with the SBIR programs, and across the federal agencies, the ones that have the largest budgets, let's say, participate in the SBIR and or STTR programs. And historically or traditionally, that starts as like a phase 1 feasibility proof of concept project. And then maybe moves to a phase 2, little bit longer R&D project. At the end, and then there's this magical phase 3 where you actually commercialize your technology and it's out there in the marketplace and being sold. But between phase 2 and phase 3 is this big gap, this valley of death. I think some of you probably know that term or hate that term. But we at NCI have inserted another opportunity, and we call that phase 2B. And like New Jersey, the NCI provides matching funds. And so for any cancer technology that's received a phase 2 award from any agency, you could apply to NCI's phase 2B program as a funding opportunity. And the NCI, through peer review and competitive application, could provide as one-to-one matching funds for up to $4 million in additional resources. So I wanted to share that as something that we provide. So for banking institutions that provide funds to small businesses, those would be the kinds of funds that would qualify for matching, for the NCI to match. I believe that like New Jersey's matching fund program, I think would also qualify as well. And I just love to hear that's something happening over there. I've seen that in other states. I think Kentucky was where I first saw that, possibly Tennessee, and maybe others in the Midwest as well. But I love to see that the state level is also getting involved with matching funds too. So I wanted to just pause and see if there are any questions or comments or thoughts about any of that. And I see Anita, yeah.
Yes, I have a question. For the matching fund, can it come from foreign company? Because our company, for example, right now we are about to sign maybe a partnership with a foreign company, and later, but we are also applying for SBIR phase 2.
Sure. That's a great question. And so I'm going to answer that on multiple levels. I'm going to answer your question different ways, because there are different times and ways that foreign companies can invest in your US-based small business, right? So
Yes.
for the purposes of phase 2B matching funds, yes, a foreign entity could provide those matching funds. Now, in the SBIR policies, there is language that says the company must be majority owned by US, US citizens. With the exception of SBIR eligibility, you could be more than 50% VC owned, if no single VC has control of the company. So let's say you're 51% owned by a combination of VCs, and if each of them is 25, 26, that would be fine. But you should pay attention to that as well. So the ownership and control of the company, we'd want for SBIR eligibility to stay eligible, we'd want to see that you still had US control of it.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. In our case, it's easy because it's a partnership. We don't have any equity.
Okay.
And we don't take any equity. So it's really development in parallel.
Okay, yeah. So that would not affect your eligibility in that case for SBIR, and that would still be qualifying for matching funds for the phase 2B.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Thanks, Anita. I'm just going to keep plowing through with some of the notes that I put down. Someone was asking about what are the latest funding opportunities we have. And I don't know how many of you have applied to the NIH before, but our main umbrella for you, the investigators, to submit your applications is under what we call our omnibus solicitation. And I say omnibus solicitation as a bit of a misnomer because there are actually 4 omnibus solicitations, 2 of them for SBIR, 2 of them for STTR. 2 of them are for projects with no clinical trial work, and then 2 of them are for projects where clinical trial work is going to be required. And so we've matrixed it based on clinical trial or no clinical trial and SBIR versus STTR. But all 4 of them do accept applications from investigators based on your ideas for what kind of research you'd like to propose to the NIH. And so that is by far the most popular way folks engage with the NIH, with NCI, is to apply under one of those 4 omnibus solicitations. At this time, they are, as of last week, when I checked, they were still dark. We haven't yet reissued those funding opportunities. The next application deadline would be in September 7th, I think is what it would be, I think with the holidays. But by then, we fully anticipate that the new funding opportunity announcements would be out and on the street for people to apply through. So for any of you with an idea already there cooking in your head, September deadline under our omnibus solicitations is definitely one way to go. Now, another opportunity that we will have coming online, and this happens annually, and not through all institutes at the NIH, but with the NCI, once a year, we also put out a contracts SBIR R&D solicitation. And this year, we've actually already distributed the titles for our contract solicitation, for our contract topics anticipated. So you could today go online to sbir.cancer.gov, click around for funding, go to contracts, and you can see the titles for the topics that will be solicited. Now, the actual solicitation isn't yet on the street, but the topics are there. And so you can get a sense for what kinds of research the NCI is going to be soliciting in the form of an SBIR contract. Now, how is that different from an SBIR grant? Well, the grant is where you, the investigators, write up your proposal or your ideas on what you'd like NIH to fund, and you submit that to us. The contracts, kind of in inverse, is where we, the federal government, come together and we say, you know what, these are the areas we think we'd like to see small businesses come with their ideas on how to address these issues. And so you can think of the contract topics as one of the signposts for what the NCI thinks is important at this time. And so take that with a grain of salt, but that's one way to think about our contracts solicitation. And historically, the pre-solicitation comes out in July. with the full solicitation in August, with a submission deadline in October, in mid-late October. So I wanted to share that with folks as well. And someone asked what were the changes that we anticipate with the Biden administration's activities. The one thing that I can say without fail is that the set aside that we have in terms of funding is tied to our extramural budget. So with any congressional budget or that's passed, we look at our extramural budget. If our extramural budget grows, then our SBIR, STTR pot of money grows. If that shrinks, then that proportionally shrinks. And that's like a 3.65 cumulative bucket. At the NIH whole, that's over $1 billion. That was true last fiscal year. And close to 180 million at the NCI. So real money for real commercialization activities available for SBIR and STTR. Any questions on that?
Christie, I was hopefully I'm not cutting anyone off, but I was wondering if you could maybe explain the difference between the SBIR and STTR programs, and also if a company was to participate or be accepted into one, would they still be eligible for funding from the other?
That's a great question, Jake. So I'll sort of break that down. SBIR versus STTR. Now, if any of you has applied to other federal agencies, you should note that agencies view those two mechanisms differently. At the NIH, SBIR and STTR are very similar in the scope and type of work that gets proposed. The real differences for the NIH when we look at SBIR versus STTR really are on the policy eligibility rules. So for SBIR, collaboration with a university or research institution is optional. For STTR, that collaboration is required. That's a defining feature of STTR, is you have a formal collaboration with a research institution. Under SBIR, when we look at your budget for how the dollars are split across the main applicant, the small business versus any collaborators or subcontractors, for SBIR, at least 2/3 of the budget in a phase one, say, has to be with the small business. So keep that in mind. That leaves up to 1/3 for any optional contractors, collaborators that you have on your team. For STTR, because there's this formal collaboration between the company and the university, say, for STTR, at least 40% of the budget has to be with the company. At least 30% of the budget has to be with that collaborating research institution. And the last 3% can go to one, the other, or even another third party. So there's a little bit more flexibility in how the budget can be distributed for an STTR. And that can be really important, especially if you note that some universities have really high indirect rates. As an example, some have like 100% overhead. And so when you think about how you're splitting up that effort and who does what, that can be really important. And that can tip the balance on whether or not you go for an STTR versus an SBIR. Now, the third criteria to think about, I think has actually gotten a little bit more creative on the applicant side. And that is, where is the PI majority affiliated at the time of award? And I say at the time of award because it's not at the time of application. It actually doesn't matter where you are at the time of application. It's where you are at the time of award. And so for SBIR, you have to be majority employed at the small business for the work, for the period of the project you're proposing. For STTR, that PI can be majority employed at either the small business or at the research institution. Now, when I say folks can sometimes get creative is when they come up with, let's say, a multi-PI plan or a co-PI plan, in which case you could have a mix of university and small business PIs in either an SBIR or an STTR application. So that kind of breaks them down. And I'm going to pause here and see if there are any questions about that, because I know I did my hand waving in lieu of having any slides. See if folks have questions on there.
Actually, I'm not sure I understand because we are applying as a multi-PIs. When we got an SBIR phase 1 and I was the only, I was the PI. And now because we require more specialty, basically we are applying as a multi-PI. So then it's not necessary if I'm the corresponding PI, I don't need necessarily to be 50% employed by the company.
So for STTR, there's
Okay,
flexibility in your affiliation. So you could be with the university as the PI on an STTR, and that is fine.
But SBIR is still 50%. I mean, as one, because two of us are in the company, and the third one, we are 3, is in the university. So the 50% is 2 of us, or it's 1 of us has to be by itself?
It's who the corresponding PI is, their majority appointment. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's a great clarifying question. Thank you for that. Yeah. Now, the other point I think that I heard from Jake's question was, do you apply to one versus the other? So I generally encourage researchers to pick the one that works best for the kind of research they want to propose. But the other factor that many tend to take into consideration, and I'm not saying you have to weigh this heavily or not, is the size of the money available versus in SBIR versus STTR. The pot of money for SBIR is on order 11 times bigger than the STTR pot. And that's because it's 3.2% of our budget versus 0.45% of our budget. And so you can see there's more money available for SBIR than there is for STTR. Now, what does that mean for which ones have you have a better shot at in applying? I can honestly say that it depends year to year. And we don't know in advance which one's going to have the more stringent, scoring criteria or selection criteria, because it's dependent on the number of applications that come in and on how well they perform in peer review. And so I strongly recommend that folks consider what their research calls for and how their work labor needs to be divided, and use those criteria to drive the decision for SBIR versus STTR. But that was a great question, Jake. Did I miss any parts of that question you had?
No, not at all. Very thorough. Appreciate it.
I wanted to jump next to a topic that I think Phil brought up. And I want to take this opportunity to re-stress that at the NIH, we have a strong commitment to building a diverse workforce, not just for the NIH internally, but externally for the workforce that we support with our NIH funding. And so we are very much looking to build an inclusive entrepreneurship ecosystem to support researchers with diverse cognitive backgrounds, as well as cultural perspectives, because we absolutely believe that diverse perspectives bring better solutions. And when your mission is addressing cancer, you really want the best perspectives to get the best tools out. And so one opportunity that I want to share that I think has been to date not as highly leveraged as it could be is our SBIR diversity supplement. And so for any of you who's received an NIH award in the past, you may be familiar with this concept of getting an administrative supplement. And in practice, that is, after you get, let's say, a phase 1, you can apply for additional funds under an administrative supplement mechanism. Well, about maybe 2 years ago, we developed for SBIR specifically a diversity supplement that is designed to support small businesses in bringing into their companies, into the experience of entrepreneurship, individuals who are traditionally underrepresented in the life science spaces. And the diversity supplement will support STEM professionals all along the professional pipeline, from high school all the way through PI level, to give them experience. And the idea is to give them access and entrance into the small business setting to do R&D at a biotech company. And so we provide those through what we call our diversity supplement. And so for For those who have an award and are looking to give experiences to, say, undergraduates or graduate students or postdocs and bring them in, let's say you want to bring them over from the university setting and give them an opportunity to shadow and work with the C-level executives at the company in, participating in meetings and getting mentorship. The diversity supplement would cover those kinds of activities. So I wanted to share that as an opportunity.
I just want to take a second and say thank you for that specifically. At the Science Center with our workforce program, we definitely try to engage as many people on all education levels into the life science space. Some entry points are a little bit more challenging than others, but I think that's really good information to know. And I'm not an investor or company owner or anything like that. I think my role at Science Center is really just to be able to connect as many different companies with community and as many companies with folks who are looking for entry points into this space as possible. So like learning about this, knowing about this information is really good and really valuable for me. So when I go out and talk with small businesses, large businesses, whatever businesses, I can say like, hey, did you hear about this thing? SBIR, STTR. So this is just really good information for me to absorb.
Absolutely. And that's part of what I want to make sure happens over today, is make sure you hear about these resources so that you can amplify those messages to those who can, participate and engage. Let's see. Let me pause first for some coffee and then see if there are folks who have questions. I see Ali, your video's back on. Did you have a specific question?
Yeah, sure. I guess so I'm an undergraduate student and I've had a little experience working in a lab, and specifically some of the research is like applicable to cancer research. And I guess what I'm wondering is how do you bring, research papers that are published and everything like that, and to like the stage of like R&D, like how do those things work, and like get to talking to the right people to actually like create something to test in the future? I think that's like, there's a gap in my knowledge there, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. So.
All right, great question. So there is an opportunity. So what I heard, and feel free to correct me or massage that, is how do you take ideas that you have, let's say at the university or research closer to the research bench, and sort of test them out and see if these are the kinds of things that could be applicable for a small business to innovate on and take forward?
Yeah.
That's a great question. And I can say that at the National Cancer Institute's SBIR Development Center, we have an open email policy where we would accept invitations or requests to meet with program directors to talk about these projects before you apply for SBIR. So a common way to do this is to either send an executive summary of your technology or what you think is going to be the technology, or if you've already gone through the process of trying to put it on paper, if you have a draft of specific aims, we love looking at those. You can email them to us. We have a staffed mailbox, NCI SBIR at mail.nih.gov. Where you can send that and a request to talk to a program director. And depending on the scope of the work, the kind of vertical it's in, we will make sure that you get connected to the first available appropriate program director who has the technical expertise to weigh in. And we'll set up like a 30-minute Zoom call these days to talk about your project and how it fits with our NCI mission. And because at the NCI or at the NIH, the process of review is segregated from the process of program management, we can give you feedback on what we've seen based on review with similar or like technologies, and give you feedback on the things that we note you would want to watch out for. For instance, making sure that your aims have quantitative milestones. We could talk through what that looks like, or if you're, coming with a small molecule, what kinds of data could be appropriate for demonstrating preliminary work, and what kinds of studies should you plan on doing in a phase 1 or phase 2. We can talk about those kinds of things you can talk about those kinds of things with a program director, and we can set that up if you engage with us.
Awesome,
And
thank you.
Yeah, and let me just applaud you, Allie, for being interested even at this stage. When I was an undergraduate, I was at UC San Diego, which is still today a hotbed of biotech industry. And my ability to work early on, I didn't mention this in my introduction, but for a time I was working at Illumina in San Diego, back when they were still a small business, kind of in their pre-IPO stage. And for me, that was sort of the bug that bit to get me really excited and engaged with what translation applied science could do for health. For health and life well-being. So I love to hear that you're already engaged.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Christie, I just saw that Pam had a question in the chat. She asked, do you need to have a company for the SBIR?
A great question. And the answer is yes. Yes, you do. So for both SBIR and STTR, for grants and for contracts, in all those cases, to apply for these funding opportunities, you do have to have a small business set up to start. And that's because it's the small business that will be applying for federal funds. Any collaborators like a university, like another research institute, like subcontractors, they're all going to be subs to the actual applicant and awardee, the small business. So it is required that you have a small business. And part of your eligibility to applying for SBIR and STTR is that you have, at the NIH, is that you have a handful of registrations completed. Those include a DUNS number, an EIN number, a SAM.gov account, an ERA account, and be registered with the SBA as well, the Small Business Administration. So there are a number of things that you need to have in place. I think in the US, setting up a company is, I'm not going to say straightforward, but I think has fewer hurdles than other countries around the globe. But you do need to have a small business setup. And it doesn't, there's flexibility. It doesn't have to be a C Corp. It could be an LLC. You know, there are a number of different ways you could set up your company, but a company does need to be set up so that it can apply for the SBIR or STTR funds. Thank you for that question, Pam.
Cool. Actually, Christie, Allie's question about testing reminded me of one that I wanted to ask. So I was reading about investigational device exemption, which I'm sure people on this call know better than me, but it's an exemption that allows devices to be used in a clinical study to test effectiveness and safety. So could you maybe share what are the testing requirements or studies that are needed to support this type of exemption?
Oh, wow. So that's kind of it's hard to answer that question because it really depends on the kind of technology and how it's being applied and how it's proposed to be applied. So let me instead point your viewers here to another resource that we have and the FDA has as an example. So the FDA has set up a website where they have where they've set up email mailboxes specifically to engage small businesses in an informal fashion. And so a lot of these kinds of questions, the FDA now has a communication line where you can ask these questions and get answers without starting any clocks on FDA conversations, if you will. And so those are the kinds of things that you definitely can do a little bit of specific customer discovery on your end, on you, the investigator, on your end, to get a better sense for what those requirements are. It's just really hard to answer that because it's so tech dependent. But a similar program that we have for our awardees in NCI SBIR is our CARE program. And in similar fashion, it's an opportunity where we help facilitate the Q&A that our companies have for regulatory agencies, specifically the FDA, to get some of these questions answered. But you're part of the charm of working in the life science space is that there are a lot of regulations to take into consideration if you actually want to get something approved for selling in commercial space. So that's absolutely true. And it's absolutely right that folks are thinking about that. Yeah.
I just wanted to check the chat, see if I had missed another question. But if no one has a question, I'll jump in with another.
Okay, if no one has questions, I have questions.
Oh, yeah, please.
I'm doing a little bit of customer discovery on my side. And so one of the things I want to know from this audience is, what are your thoughts about the federal government? And I know we're recording, but but please be candid. I'm interested to know, what are your perceptions of accessing federal funds? And without putting too many words into your mouth, I'm really honestly interested in hearing, do you consider it easy or not? Or I mean, you know, in a lot of ways, you are very educated here because you already signed up for this this session. But I would love to hear from you, and we can follow up offline if you want to tell me on the DL what you think. But I'm really interested to know what makes you decide and when is the right time for you to approach the federal government for funding. That's one of the questions I have. And while you're thinking over that question, I am going to answer Pam's email about I-Corps before or after the SBIR phase 1. And so it's really important to recognize that the NIH, that the I-Corps program is predicated on having an active phase 1 award. And so it's not a before or after phase 1, it's actually a during phase 1. And so there's a little bit of coordination and dance that has to happen if you want to go through the NIH's I-Corps program. And I will say that the NIH's I-Corps program was based on the NSF's I-Corps program, and NSF historically was designed for folks still in the academic space. But the NSF has now grown their program to include tracks specifically for their SBIR, STTR awardees. And so I think there's a lot of traction around the federal government to engage innovators at both the pre-company stage and in the company stage. So I wanted to make that clarification. The paperwork. Thank you, Judith. I appreciate that. There is a lot of paperwork. I was just telling a colleague, even for me in the federal government, I have a lot of paperwork to do.
I mean, I can tell you with our matching program,
Yeah.
we give people, you know, we do sort of a missing documentation review, and we give people 10 days to correct errors that they might have made if they didn't upload a tax clearance properly, they didn't have some of their other elements properly uploaded. And I have to tell you, if we didn't give them that opportunity to correct mistakes, I'd be giving money to nobody, because almost everybody needed some sort of hand-holding to get the administrative pieces even of our state program correct.
Wow. Oh, and that was just you helping them with, okay, with both the admin, with the New Jersey and
Yeah.
with the.
No, really, it's with the New Jersey ones, and I know they have similar problems when they're applying to. Because in your case, if you apply and you don't have your documentation correct, there's no recovery. Boom, you're not being reviewed or looked at all.
Yeah, that is true. And Judith, this gives me, thank you for sharing that. I absolutely feel that and have seen that. And so to hear it from your mouth is also really powerful. I wanted to take this opportunity to also point out that we have at the NIH, a number of institutes have started engaging, and the NCA was a leader in this, in developing its application assistance program.
Okay, Taba, right?
So not Taba specifically, okay, but I can get into Taba in a little bit if you like. But the AAP is actually designed for people before they get into the SBIR program. And it's specifically targeting folks who've not yet been successful at getting an NIH SBIR STTR. We have contracted with Eva Garland Consulting to provide a 10-week resource where they can get support to make sure they put together a compliant NIH application. Our hypothesis being that a lot of people who come to the SBIR STTR programs through either their circumstances, maybe their resources locality-wise, or their history prior to being a small business, they didn't have the right resources or tools or experience to put together a daunting NIH application. And so we want to make sure that filing the paperwork was not the barrier to getting funding. We wanted their science to be able to speak for that. And so we put together the applicant assistance program, and that's called the AAP. And right now we're in the process of, I think we've just done selection for those applicants to help them in preparation for the September deadline. But historically, we've been offering it now for 2 years, and we cycle it so that we can support folks at each of the 3 standing omnibus application deadlines.
Great.
Yeah.
I haven't heard this, but I've also heard on one other commentary that some of the people were complaining about the record keep. Once you got the award, the financial record keeping for some of the small businesses was challenging, as opposed to, again, a large company may have a larger, finance accounting department. So I've heard some of the small businesses complain about the time tracking stuff that they need to be able to demonstrate.
Yes. I've heard that as well. And so for folks who are on the phone, maybe you're still at the university, if you haven't given your staff who support grant submission enough love, please reconsider, because as a small business, you're the applicant, you have to do it yourself. And navigating these systems is not always intuitive. And so I remember when I was in the university lab setting, sort of just fighting with the institution's offices. They're asking for all of my paperwork well before the submission deadline. And it's like, well, why do I have to do it so early? And it's because there's a lot of paperwork you have to make sure is compliant if you're actually going to get reviewed. And so as a small business, you don't, if you're not from a big lab and haven't had a lot of opportunities to write big R1 grants over and over again, putting together an SBIR application can be very difficult. And so, yeah, the record keeping too, even after you get the award, how do you make, payroll happen is big too. So I absolutely understand that. And thank you for that pain point too. I appreciate that.
For the supplement, do they have to have an active award to apply for the supplement? So it's not like I finished my phase 1 and now, okay.
Yeah, supplements, as their name sort of implies, is it would be added to an active award. Gotcha. So to be able to apply, you have to have an active award, and then you would apply for the supplement to that award. Yes, but that's a great question. Yeah. Someone said the words Taba, which stands for Technical and Business Assistance. And I thought maybe I could dive into that a little bit. The policies on Taba have changed over the years. And even the acronym Taba is sort of a new one for us. But what it means right now at the NIH for SBIR and STTR is that in your application, you can, for phase 1, you can ask for up to $6,500 in technical and business assistance funds. You would write those into your budget as a line item under other direct costs. So if any of you has already seen what the budget form looks like, there's like all your direct costs, indirect costs. There are other direct costs, and I think there are even line items 8, 9, and 10. In line 8, you could write technical and business assistance up to $6,500. And that money can go to a contractor who provides not the R&D kind of support, but more of really those technical and business assistance kinds of support. And that would include regulatory consultants, IP consultants, manufacturing consultants, market research reports, those kinds of things can be listed as an other direct cost. And in a phase one, you could budget up to $6,500 for that. In a phase two, that number is 50,000. So you could request up to $50,000 in Taba funds in your phase two budgets. An alternative to asking for the 6,500 is something that we call newly offered, calling our oh shucks, what are we calling it? It's our needs assessment program, where we have another contractor that we've brought on board called Christie, and they will do a sort of in-depth market analysis on your technology and the space around it. And I've seen these reports, and they are quite comprehensive and can really be of value if you're trying to figure out who your competitors are, what spaces they are in, who alternatively could be viewed as a potential strategic collaborator, those kinds of things. And so that kind of assessment can be really valuable in your phase one and tee you up for what you might request in your phase two application. So I just want to bring that to folks' attention as well.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, we have a few minutes left here. So if we have any final thoughts or questions for Christie, please feel free to throw them out there. But if not, Christie, is there anything else you'd like to share, or any place you'd like to direct people who have follow-up questions, or really anything you want to plug?
Yeah, I would like to encourage folks who want to continue these conversations to reach out to us at NCI SBIR at mail.nih.gov. That's our staffed email inbox. You can also follow us on social media. We are on LinkedIn under NCI SBIR Development Center, and we're on Twitter at NCI SBIR. And we love engaging with you. And we aim to serve. We are public servants. And so being able to support the innovation, entrepreneur ecosystem and moving your technologies so that you can benefit all of us, that's really what we're here for. So thank you everyone for all the work that you do and all the places you'll go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Christie. You've shared a wealth of information with us this afternoon. So really appreciate your time and insight on all of this. Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Yeah. Thanks, everyone, for joining. We will reach out to you with a survey probably sometime this afternoon or tomorrow. And you can also find information on our next Coffee and Capital session that will be taking place towards the end of July. So hope you all enjoy the rest of your afternoons, and we look forward to seeing you at the next session.